let's dispense with the formalities here and gavel this to order, Arone Dyer. Miss Arone.
Oh, okay.
Miss
I just
Arone.
did it. I just did an exercise class, so I'm looking ravenous.
You have a glow about you. You have a sheen. What was your what was your exercise class?
I've been doing this exercise class with a bunch of musicians and like recording engineers and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. Since I think last September.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just online. It's called the South Brooklyn. What is it? SB Exercise whatever. SBCEC is what they call it. And it's just online and it's like it's nice. It's been predictable and
Great.
same people, made friends.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to get. I'm starting to get back on the train.
Mm.
Of the this last year was pretty well. First of all, Aaron, how are you? Welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks,
And
Josh.
I want to apologize for sort of tacitly ghosting you
Me
for a
over and over.
well,
Yeah. Yeah. It's
yeah,
fine.
well, yes. But
I just assumed that you had
well,
died, really. So
luckily I didn't.
that's good, yeah.
But I also, yeah. So it's been a hell of a year, and we've been texting privately about just you know stuff. What do you want to choose? What fat do you want to chew today, my friend?
Well, I think in our last text when we talked, I was like nudging you. I was like, when are we going to talk? And then you're like, oh, you again.
No, very few people are
And
always like are like actually want to talk to me on a podcast on a regular basis. So I appreciate it. I'm genuinely grateful. But go ahead. Sorry.
well, I think I had talked about feeling or wanting to talk about aging out aging out of music, aging out of the
Mm-hmm.
industry. And I think that that's just something I've been thinking about for at least a couple years. For until now. I'm 41.
So am I. I'm
Yeah, I think we knew that somewhere in our brains we were aware of this.
mm-hmm.
And just, I think mm, I think about being female and uh aging out of music because I think it's really hard for women to um keep respected or stay respected um, into their older age. And I know there are a lot of women who are still respected, but I think just it's something that I've seen happen um, more in my lifetime than perhaps someone who's younger than me who is seeing more recognition for women
Mm-hmm.
at this time. Right.
It's yeah. It's like this weird. Well, this is the sort of internal strife I have of like how much do I like how do you acknowledge progress
Mm-hmm.
but also acknowledge the current reality that we're in and see yourself on a timeline of evolutionary progress, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, I mean, the stuff I'm hearing you say is that it feels that maybe I'm mishearing what you're saying, but you're sort of women, or at least what in your experience, are in this phase of like, what is it, Indiana Jones, where they switch the sand for for the idol, you know, and it's
Yeah.
like that moment is so treacherous, and it's like right now that's kind of feels to me just post me, not post Me Too, we're still in the Me Too thing, but post the real start of the social awareness of that is my what I was trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
It's that's also the time when all the arrows come out of the walls and like all the shit, you know, like all the other shit that happens, and it's like, but I have faith that in 30 years things will be a notch better. It's just that's sad.
Sure.
It
When
just
I'm
move.
70, things will be a notch better. And by the time I'm 70, I'll definitely be fucking aged out.
No, I
Nobody
know
wants to see a 70-year-old woman unless you're like
that's
Aretha
not true.
Franklin, unless you are soul, unless you are like deep country. Like,
Well,
yeah, I want to see Dolly Parton. But Dolly Parton's been around for how long has she been around?
yeah,
Like they both for a long time since the freaking sorry, I don't know how long. I want to say 60s, but I know that I'm wrong.
say eons, say eons. Then that doesn't.
Eons.
Yeah, yeah.
Like they were here when they were like in their early like late teens, early 20s, right? Is when they started getting recognized. Like they've been around and they've created such a legend of themselves, and that's huge, and that's what keeps their that's yeah, that's their oh shoot, what's the word? Not legend. Their not success, legacy.
Mm,
And I think like uh yeah, I don't have children,
hmm
but I also don't really have that legacy. And I think not seeing it, or maybe not, maybe I'm in a position where I just can't see what I do have sometimes. And that's the hard thing. Is
I
like
would.
where where do I have to stand in my life in order to see what I've accomplished and like
Uh,
be super appreciative? Because like so many people are like, love yourself and like be proud and like love all the stuff that you've done. And yeah, and I can say, yeah, I've done a lot of stuff, but it's hard to have that kind of perspective and be proud of it and see that forward momentum. And yeah, what do you
well,
do?
I don't know,
Stuck in that cycle.
and just to the stuff you're saying right now is all stuff. If you take gender out of it for 2 seconds,
Hmm.
it's all stuff I identify with too. Like I don't like where do you stand? How can you self assess?
Hmm.
How do you do the autopsy on what your career has been thus far when you're the body, you know,
Right.
and your work is the thing that's on the table. I would only, and I'm speculating here, but like folks like you mentioned, like Dolly Parton or Aretha Franklin, like when they were 41, I imagine their legacy was just as out of reach for them as it was for you in terms of what they felt their impact. Now,
Right.
all that is Aretha and Dolly are maybe just they're bad examples because they're like
Well, how about Tina Turner?
even Tina Turner's a bad example. I mean, you're like
Really?
you're naming well, no, no, no. Well, I mean, in the sense that
Oh,
like you're naming like human jet engines that are like,
but that's
you
the
know,
thing. Like that's their they worked. They
mhm,
weren't like they maybe had children, but they weren't at home taking care of the children. They were working. They had a
mhm,
very different
mhm,
um lifestyle, if you want to call it that, um than a lot of people. And I think I've done the same thing. I have uh prevented myself from even thinking that children were a possibility because I'm focused on this one train
do
and
you want kids?
I'm grabbing onto that train as fast as much as I can. What?
Do you want sorry, do you want kids?
I have always gone back and forth between wanting them and not wanting them because like, well, if I have them, I will become a mother. Like that's
Mm,
just what happens. Like you don't I don't see a lot of examples of women. I see really successful women with children, successful women with children and money,
mhm,
but I don't see a lot of women in my position becoming successful beyond like if I were to have children now, it just wouldn't like there's no I wouldn't be able to balance. It would have to be one or the other for me.
Well, that's an
I've
important thing. I mean, I don't have kids either, and I mean, I'm saying this and like, of course, like if Stephanie and I had a child tomorrow, which would be a really fast timeline. The truth is, the biological fact is that that baby needs Stephanie more than it needs me,
hmm.
and so like, I could be at the hospital, she could shoot that baby out, and I'd be like, I'm going to Holland, you know, like. I'm going to play a show with Buke and Gase and make $432. Isn't that great? Like, um,
Oh, that's lame.
but that's just like the biological truth that I
Yeah.
think a lot of men. It's just like it's never crosses our mind. It's not. There's no like. At least from my standpoint, there's not a like act of malice like sitting there and take care of the baby. But like,
No.
it's just the reality. And I think I'm saying that because I think guys need to just have an awareness of like Arone Dyer has a baby. There's at least 9 months of gigs where you're at least thinking about this baby constantly, you know, or 10 months, and then
Yeah.
afterwards there's
You're not thinking about
breastfeeding and there's
anything.
are you pumping? Are you playing gigs with Aaron? Do you have to pump before the show? Like, oh my God, nothing pumped out. Like now I have
Uh,
to now I'm in Sweden and I need to find like like can I get my baby on the plane? Does my baby have the vaccine card? Do I, what's that? Like, all of a sudden it becomes,
Yeah.
Rahel,
It's just impossible. And
what?
it sounds impossible. I know that it has happened. I know that there are people who have done it.
Mhm.
Um, but I don't like it's a really rough scenario, and I also see kids who have been through that kind of scenario, that kind of upbringing,
Mm.
being a little bit like a little bit chaotic, to say the least, you know? And
Well,
I'm not trying to say that everyone turns out that way. And
yeah.
I recognize that it's a very individual thing. And I apologize for blanketing it in that statement. And I guess it's my own insecurity thinking of it that way, right?
I mean, I think that's any of our fears about hypothetical stuff down the line because of a decision we make is all
Yeah.
based, and justifiably so, in fear and insecurity because it's an
Yeah.
unknown. But let me ask you, let me rewind a little bit. Like, I think I feel like what I'm hearing you saying is I'm a self-deprecating person. And I'm like, every time I practice by myself, I'm like, you're a fat fuck, and like, you stupid piece of shit. Like, I'm hard on myself. Sorry, I mean, I don't actually take that seriously, but it's like my first place is to blame myself.
Me too.
Why is it that calling balls and strikes, you are a singular voice in a field that doesn't have a lot of female voices in it. You are a creative musician who can function in almost any scenario you're put in, whether it's with people who only read music or only do this, and or classical music, and then there's drone choir, and there's all these other things that like no one else is doing. And so, if in 80 years, when you're 80, there is to be a legacy left on that particular branch of the wave function of the universe, like that is Arone Dyer,
Yeah.
then the only way for that legacy to exist is for you to stick with it,
Yeah.
because
To make continue.
no one else is doing it.
No, and that's why I can't have kids.
Well,
But then,
yeah.
well, then there's all these other things. Okay, so and I've seen in your so you asked me to think of some questions for you, and I was like, oh, well, what's the best way to do this? So I went onto your Instagram,
Oh God.
and like, and I see that like a huge part of a huge part of what you do is supporting the pan
Oh yes,
orchestras.
yes. Good. I'm glad that's what you gathered from my Instagram. I was a little
Well,
scared for
yeah,
a
yeah,
second.
no. Also being humorous and also making sure that people who follow you are just taking life a little less seriously and like watching fart videos and infrared. And
I mean, that was good, right?
it's
I mean,
really good.
I feel
I'm
like
like,
the thing I loved about it is that real farts look like cartoon farts.
yeah,
It's like literally the only thing that is like in humanity naturally that is the uncanny valley. That you look at, you're
yeah,
like, wait, is that a cartoon or is that real?
yeah. Is that real? Did somebody just make that? No. But then you see the people stop and they're like looking at their phone and then they look around and then they let
Yeah.
it out.
Oh yeah, it's so good. The one guy like
I
shakes
do
his
that
leg
too. I
afterwards.
do it
Sorry,
all the
go ahead.
time. But I
Sorry.
didn't see anybody wave it away. I wanted to see it get waved away. Anyways,
Wafted towards you. Sorry.
yeah. Well, okay. Anyways, the reason why I brought up your Instagram is because, and the pan orchestras is because, steel pan orchestras is because, like, at this point, I feel like a lot of what I've, like, starting at 35, age 35, I focused a lot more or thought more about nurture.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And, like, I don't know if that's just a desire to, yeah, a desire to pass torches,
Mm.
to support other people, um and I see that that's what you're doing in your uh I don't know the word, in your efforts to support the steel pan
Mm-hmm.
orchestras. So like is that something that you would think vibes correctly with you? Do you feel like in whatever?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it. I would. Uh, no, I don't know
Not a
exactly.
podcast person.
I don't know. I feel like just a side note. I think you and I need to start a podcast, like a
Hmm.
legit separate podcast that is a new entity, because I feel like our rat-a-tat would be is humorous. But anyway, I'm not sure exactly what your question is, but
Well, it's about nurture. Do you feel like a sudden drive for nurture, a drive to nurture?
I hmm, I
I
wouldn't.
think you go ahead.
I would say I don't know that it was like a conscious like I need to do this now, but it was again like more of a slow like changing of the bag from like things I was experiencing as a student, coming up through grad school at Yale and then getting starting to teach steel band at NYU. Basically, like I was still an Ohio boy. Like all my connections were Ohio. Everything I knew about Pan was from Ohio and Trinidad. I didn't really know the Brooklyn scene at all, and I just got like for all of whatever all of the reasons are, like this white kid from Ohio was plucked out of Yale and dropped at NYU with all the privilege, all the stuff. Like the thing I feel like I'm good at, where my weaknesses are, where my strength is I know what I'm bad at. And as soon as I got dropped in that scene, it was immediately apparent to me that like, oh wow, okay, this is the cultural vibe that I felt when I was in Trinidad. I never felt that in Ohio. Not no value judgment. It's just that it didn't exist really. But I didn't know how to tap into it. I didn't know necessarily like what was my responsibility there. I just had this feeling of like this is different. And over time, the more I sort of like brought in people to help me do the things I'm shitty at, like I was like, oh wow, like Kendall Williams, my friend Kendall, who now teaches with me at NYU in Princeton, was a student at NYU, and maybe it sounds kind of selfish, but I'm just like, he just is gonna make this all better if I just if I empower him in this room to do the thing that he's grown up since he was 6 doing.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I'm abdicating my response or my skill set. Like I know a lot about Pan, and I can teach a room full of kids about the history of Pan without having a Trinidadian person in the room. But I think in that moment of like when knowledge is being exchanged, especially like not cultural knowledge, but just the like I'm gonna smell a certain way when you're in a pan yard, and there's gonna be like the slang I use, like or blah blah blah, like all that stuff was really important, and so I felt a responsibility growing early on to sort of just like tap into that, and over time it became something I felt like I needed to because there was an awareness that other steel band educators, like my colleagues, were not able to experience that thing. I felt it was like okay, I need to sort of like put this up there so I need to push this up on a hilltop so my friends over in Ohio can see this. Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Yes, totally. That makes a lot of sense. I have one question. Did you say you're gonna smell a particular way? Did you reference the way you smell?
Sorry, meaning when you walk into a different, like if you walk into an Indian home,
Yeah.
you're gonna smell things differently than you did if you tried to make Indian food at your own house.
Oh,
Like with
yeah.
out of a recipe book. Like there's just things that are burnt into the walls and the carpet in somebody's home who's from India. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and I think in Trinidad, it's like when you're in a pan yard, there's just ways the air moves differently. There's ways interactions happen. Um,
Olfactory
all
sense,
of it.
olfactory memory and yeah, organization.
So anyway, to me that was.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all the dumb stuff. I mean, this sounds like very trivial, and I don't want to be glib about it, but it's like if you've never been around dreadlocks, like you can either read about them
Look
or
at
be
pictures.
terrified to ever ask any questions about it, or you can be a student at NYU and stand right next to somebody who has dreadlocks and understand that the oils and the stuff that they use are different than what I put in my beard, and that like all of those things are it's just those things are important to me, and
Yeah,
they're important for my students. So that's what I meant by that.
that makes a lot of sense.
So does that? I mean, I don't know if nurture is the word, but it's just like tending the garden I can touch. I guess is the thing. Like for me, it's like I can't really fix policing in Minneapolis. I live in
Hmm.
Manchester, and it's like I can't fix steel band culture worldwide. I can really just be like, if you just stood 2 feet over here, this whole thing's gonna look great, and feel great. Um, so that's been my approach, and I'm hoping that after 50, 60 years of that approach, I'm rolling the dice. I'm hoping it's the right approach, but we'll see.
Yeah, I really love that. Even the concept of tending the garden you can touch.
Stephanie, my wife took some Buddhism class when she was at seminary, and that was one thing that really stuck in her craw. And it's like it's the thing I feel like, especially after this last year, where when I've been texting you about like the trauma and just the like not feeling myself, and it's really been that Facebook is everyone's garden.
Hmm.
It's a rainforest. And it's raining all the time, and you're just
Yeah.
drenched when you get in there. And so like and somebody's told you that the forest is on fire at Cup Foods in Minneapolis. But again, like the reality is I'm in my living room in Manchester having a nervous breakdown because I that's a garden, it's on fire, and everybody's like, get your buckets, and I'm like, and that, so for me, that sort of mentality is what actually reminds me to be like, you can control a lot, you can help a lot of people. So rather than, yes,
Mhm.
donate to things, but like rather than getting on Facebook and melting down about bigots and racists, I'm going to email my friend and try to get a gig. I'm going to try to keep money flowing into people's pockets. I'm going to try to keep those sorts of things happening, and
Mhm.
that approach has been helpful. But it can feel self-serving. It can feel like you're avoiding the big societal issues at the same time sometimes, and that's where my guilt comes.
Yeah, I hear you. It can feel self-serving, but it's also it's a form of sanity that helps
But
keep
there's a weird trend
keep you
too. I mean,
sane.
sometimes if you say that, if you're just like, I need, like, I'm not going to participate in this particular mob panic on what for whatever issue. And again, I don't want to be glib about mob panics because George Floyd was murdered, for God's sakes. Like, yes, um, but there's a weird pushback sometimes that like silence is violence, and your complicity is the same as, it's like, it's objectively not the same. Like
Mm.
me being okay with what happened and holding a Blue Lives Matter flag up is an objectively different thing than quietly try and tend to some things that I know
That
I
you
can
can
fix here.
control.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I mean, I felt a lot of guilt for not going to, I mean, I went to one protest,
Mm.
but I didn't participate, and it was mostly because it was mostly because I rode my motorcycle into the city, and I was like afraid to just leave it with
Oh,
all of my stuff. I wasn't staying in the city, and I had a bunch of stuff with me, and I was just like, well, not that I'm worried that somebody's going to steal it, but it's like it's a little more vulnerable than driving a car.
it's just a weird. I mean, this is
But
the.
but I let
Sorry, go
me
ahead.
like I
No,
just,
sorry.
I felt really guilty for not taking part, but I've done a lot of other things
Hmm.
that I felt were helpful,
Mm.
but I don't know if they were helpful. It was in the hopes that they were helpful, like donating and supporting friends who are near me, right? So it was more like, yeah, I was trying to do the things that I could do without um also I think going on social media and like speaking out, I did a little bit of that, but I
Hmm.
also felt like it was not necessarily my voice that's going to make a difference. But maybe it is. I think we talked about that too, just as white people, as white allies to black uh um as allies,
Hmm.
we need to speak out. Um
Well, I think it's like what is the definition of speaking out? I mean, that's the thing. Like, what? How does? I think that stuff is subjective. I mean, I think speaking out is having a private conversation with a student
mhm.
and not posting it on social media, not talking about how that conversation happened and what we did and why that person was wrong, and this like sort of forced compliance that happens on social media all the time, where no one can ever, you can never say anything inappropriate and then apologize for it because the apology is never good enough. Like,
Yeah.
that's just a, in terms of where I want my voice, that's a, I want my voice in an arena where nuance and context is part of the equation. It doesn't have to be
Mhm.
all of it. I can say something stupid right now to you, and even in the context of this, the possibility of me offending you is there. But you and I have a larger context
Mhm.
that that's why I do this podcast. That's why I don't. I mean, I posted something about Joe Rogan last night because there's a New York Times article about him, and I was terrified to post it. But I was like, but the truth is that that podcast is the reason I'm doing podcasts. It's the reason I have so much joy in my life. is because I listened to Neil deGrasse Tyson. Yeah, yes, he's had Alex Jones on, and you can be all upset about that. But he's also had Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's had Eliza Schlesinger, who's a female comedian, and they talk
Yeah.
like Whitney Cummings. Like, there's all these people, and I just was like, I'm a little tired of this. Like, the New York Times wrote an article. It's a mile wide and an inch deep, and we're gonna decide that all of this is bad because it doesn't fit the narrative. And I'm just like, well, I'm going to redefine the narrative a little bit to be a little wider and include more nuance and more complications. And I don't know.
It's like allowing people to make mistakes is a part of growth. And like people can make mistakes, we can make mistakes. I've made many mistakes. And sometimes I make the same mistakes twice. And sometimes that's what it takes for me to learn something. Um but that like, empathy and patience is really important for everybody. And it's also having those conversations with people that you disagree with, or reading those conversations or listening to it helps us grow, helps us learn about each other. I mean, I feel like that's so obvious
Hmm.
and has been talked about too, at least from what I've seen.
Can
And
I can I ask you a question about
okay.
social media? And I want you, this is kind of a not a hypothetical, but I want you to look in the future a little bit. What is your what is your estimation if you were like, based on the data I see now, in the just in the way humans are communicating that way on social media, where do you see that? What do you see the effects of that being if you had to guess in 30 years? Like, do you see it working out for the better? Do you see it inevitably sort of destroying us all and creating a new form of government because we just can't function with these two separate ideologies, Facebook and real human communication? How do you see that stuff shaping out actually? Because we're in this evolutionary moment right now. I think this tension is all of us
Mm.
breaking out of
Growing.
growing, and it fucking hurts. And you know, anyway,
Right.
sorry.
Well, there's a lot of growth that's happening. I think that probably at some point social media is going to have regulations put on it. I just feel like that's gotta happen. But in the meantime, like outside of social media, like it's just there's a you can't be entirely sure how real what's happening on social media is. And when you get into reality, IRL with people and you have these conversations, it's kind of like, oh, that's what you saw? Oh, okay. And then there's like another learning moment. I just imagine that, yeah, regulations will be put on social medias, but um, the society is just gonna, we're just gonna keep on getting further and further apart because, I mean, as QAnon kind of proves, it's like you could believe in complete bullshit. That's what, I mean, in my opinion, that's what religions and that's what religions do in a lot of ways, like in industrial, institutional,
Institutional, yeah.
institutional religions are like they're myths and stories told to people over and over again that they eventually believe in so deeply that they want to control other people's lives.
My wife's a pastor now, Aaron. Watch yourself.
I just don't.
No,
I'm
I know. I'm just
not
being.
sorry.
Well, it's but again, like this is I'm glad you said that because it's something that I mean I talk with Stephanie about that a lot, and I think it does dovetail in terms of how we perceive religions. I mean, there's historical precedents, of course, that were prior to social media, but one of the things that drives her the craziest is this negativity bias that social media reinforces, where like the Westboro Baptist, and then I think you when where social media meets things like the New York Times is then where things start to gain validity that reinforce that bias. So, for example, Trump's elected. Everybody thinks that there's bands of MAGA hat wearing thugs running through every street. The New York Times posts a picture of a high school kid standing next to a Native American man in Washington, D.C., with no context, no explanation of what's happening. And that kid gets death threats and now won like a $250 million lawsuit because now I, I'm not going to wear a MAGA hat ever. But when the New York Times, which is all the news that's fit to print and is the like one of the world standards for journalism, does the thing that my crazy relative does,
Hmm.
oof,
Hmm.
oof, oh, I mean, because
Yeah, then
then
I
it's
don't trust them.
well, it's not even don't trust the New York Times. It's that it doesn't matter at that point. It's real. Perception is reality at that
Right.
point.
Yeah.
And now I don't wake up every day being like, "Oh, poor that Covington kid." But I'm sorry, that's not the way things should work.
Yeah.
And that kid was in the right in that moment. But then when you put social media on top of that again, to suggest that at the time, to suggest, this is just a picture, right? We have no idea what was happening here, was akin to being a bigot and a racist. And
Mm.
you're not towing the party line. And that shit terrifies me, Aaron.
Yeah, questioning or being skeptical. But that's the thing, like we have to allow for that. Like, okay, your wife is a pastor. I
Mm-hmm.
grew up Unitarian and the whole like that's a religion.
Mm-hmm.
But like the whole point of it is to kind of learn about other people's religions and be
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, well this group of people believes this particular thing and this
Mm-hmm.
group believes this other thing and they don't really get along. Well, like
Even though
and
they
it's
all
kind of like,
basically believe the same thing.
but it's yeah, even though it's kind of like, well, this one's like this and this one's
Yeah.
like that, but it's kind of it's the same idea, same concept. They kind of even have the same belief systems of like how to respect each other and but they don't get along because they're like protective.
Mm-hmm.
They're protective of who they believe in and their worlds. And it's like, but that's um oh, okay. Okay. Do you ever hear about this book Sapiens?
Yes.
Yeah, and I started listening to it on audiobooks because I don't read anymore.
This is Noah Yuval Harari, is that right?
Yes, yes,
Yep.
yes. And I mean, so I started listening to it. It was fascinating. And just talking like in what I heard, it was just like, oh my God, this is mind blowing. I love it. But yeah, like humans couldn't have been this successful. Basically, without belief systems.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the one defining thing about humans, which is why we can be such a massive species on this planet and work together, even though our closest relatives, the chimpanzee, can only manage to keep about 100 or so
Yeah.
individuals together in a group because like that's about as many as you can have 100 to 150
Mm-hmm.
before like all hell breaks loose and like one individual is like I want to be top dog and then the other was nah and then there's a fight and then they fraction off um and like the reason why humans were able to or like homo sapiens our species
Mm-hmm.
of all different shades,
Shapes, sizes, colors.
sizes, colors, you know, like we could do that because of belief systems and including including current belief systems which are government, corporation, um musical interests, let's put that in there.
Mm-hmm.
Like like it's just I mean QAnon, it's like all politics, everything.
Well, this is Noah Yuval Harari. I think I've started reading that book. I haven't gotten too deep into it, but listening, I do listen to some other like podcasts with like evolutionary biologists where they talk about this, that the human brain evolves at the speed it evolves,
Mhm.
but the human brain's ability to make technology that's farther ahead is always there. Like we have the creative mind is not evolving. The creative mind is like in the clear doing its thing, and it's like you could, because you're like, oh, I'm gonna go to space. Like if you were just sitting around eating nuts and pulling roots out of the ground, like and just trying to hide from the weather, 200,000 years ago, your brain's never going to think I should build a spaceship like Elon Musk, like and put a car in space. And so that stuff happens so slowly, but we're not actually keeping up evolutionarily with what we're creating technologically. And
Yeah.
I mean, this we human beings create falsehoods. There's evolutionary advantages to believing something that's not true.
Right.
Like, for example, the myth that what are the porcupines throw their quills? They don't. They don't.
No.
But when you were, if you were in some place, some climate where there were porcupines running around, it's easier to tell your child stay away from those things because they'll throw their quills. And that is an evolutionary lie that keeps your kids alive because they're not just going to go out and be like, what the fuck's this? Like, because they're going to think it's going to throw its quills. But what it does, it's kept that lineage of human beings alive. We are the human beings who didn't touch porcupines because we
Yeah.
believed that they would throw them at us. And
Right.
that sort of thing. I mean, we're also, that's why we're the humans that wore masks during the 1918 flu pandemic.
Mm-hmm. We're the humans that wore masks and got vaccinated during COVID
Right.
and stayed
And so
quarantined.
that's also where belief systems can work against you. If the belief system you're basing everything on is
Mm-hmm.
Fox News, Tucker Carlson, and the thing that makes you feel like there's some oppressive force coming after you all the time to make you wear a mask, then you're actually working against yourself.
Unless some kind of thing like January 6th comes up and it is actually successful,
Hmm.
in which case you're like, yeah, I was right. um, yeah.
Well, yeah, I again, like, I don't think there's no, I don't feel like there's an answer here, but I'm very curious. I read this book called Bury the Chains, by Adam Hochschild, and I highly recommend it for anybody who
Writing it down.
has any interest in learning about, like, if you're very passionate about the history of slavery in America, then you, I think, should be required to read this book because it is the history of the British slave trade and
Mm,
how 12 activists in England, everybody from John Newton, who wrote Amazing Grace, was a slave ship owner and absolutely was a slave ship owner for like 30 years, but had a come to Jesus moment later in life and was like, we got to stop this. And like, it was this amazing story about this coalition of like totally different people who when I read it, I was like, oh man, there's no way this would happen today. Like, because
mm,
somebody would tweet that John Newton was in the room and all of a sudden the meeting's over, and but it's amazing and the history of the Caribbean slave trade in particular. But it got me thinking about history in terms of days. That's why I brought that up. Thinking about, like, we think history ended 100 or slavery ended 156 years ago or whatever. That feels like 156 channel changes. Like, yeah, it's another, yeah, it's a generation. Well, yeah, those are different people. It's like, well, what if I told you that slavery ended 56,000 days ago?
hmm.
Does that feel any different to you?
It does.
Yeah, right. Like, because yeah, okay, in 1838, slavery's ended in Great Britain. Do you think in Haiti, it wasn't Haiti at the time, it was like Saint Domingue, I think, that they got the news and they're like, okay, cool, you guys don't have to check in tomorrow. No, they opened up and kept pulling sugar out.
Hmm.
And then a week later, some guys were like, hey, I thought we were free. And they got in a fight and then they got whipped and they got put back. Like, and now 56,000 days later, here we
Hmm.
are.
Hmm.
And we have George Floyd. And it's like,
Hmm.
you can at the same time clock the progress and be like, man, shit's definitely better than it was then. But this is a timeline. And it's like, you wonder why some of the African American community is vaccine hesitant. Well, a lot of for most folks from Western Africa, where the slave trade was taking most of its cargo, their first interaction with Western medicine was one doctor on a ship, whose job it was to wipe them down with beeswax and shove wads of old rope up their anuses to keep the dysentery from leaking out so that people didn't notice they were sick when they were trying to be sold. And again, It's not like when slavery has ended, the doctors are like, come on in here and get the vaccine. Let's take care of you. That sucked. No. Like, and so 56,000 days later, we have parts of the population that are like,
Hmm.
and we can joke about that and we can be like, oh, these people are stupid and they don't you believe in science? It's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But can't you believe that someone of who might be a descendant only 2 people ago of
Hmm.
of slaves, like that there might have been a few stories passed down that
Hmm.
that cause somebody to go ooh every
Yeah,
time they get
we hear
sick.
about our grandparents, and
Right.
we probably know more about our grandparents.
And I say all that not really genuinely not to be like white people should read this book and be guilty and feel guilty and walk around all day with but everyone who reads this book should be like, whoa. Like see everything like we're just 56,001 days today away from that. And so
Hmm.
look around you. What is still left from 1838? I'll bet you
Hmm.
could find something in Hudson, New York. I'll bet I could find something in Manchester that's like, oh wow, that post was stuck in the ground in 1832.
Hmm.
Boy, oh boy.
Yeah.
So anyway, when we talk about systemic stuff, we talk about how this stuff plays out. That sorry, there was no question here. I just rambled for a long time, Aaron. I'm really really sorry, but
Totally fine. It makes me think of like just the other day I was like, how many hours are there in a year? And it's something like 8,000,
mhm.
8,000 and change. It's like when you put it in that perspective, I'm like, oh, and then how many of those hours am I actually awake? Shit, I gotta get working. Like not that much time.
Right.
And then if you put it into perspective of days and like, yeah,
Well,
there's
I mean, when you think about like, so the moment that leads up to a thing like ending slavery, we think of ending slavery as like being this grand moment that happened, and all of society was just like, we're gonna sign the thing and cut the ribbon, and look.
I'm sorry, I gotta stop you. It like doesn't seem that way anymore. I mean, I don't know if it ever seemed like
Well,
that.
I'm saying when we now historically, I'm saying seeing it as like a moment that happened, as like, okay, that happened, and now we're past it. Like those, what happened is a bunch of people in a room, and they were just like, it's late. Can we just start back up on this tomorrow? And that's why slavery didn't end a day early.
Hmm.
It's because there was like there's only so many hours in the day, and like that how you choose to spend them.
Yeah.
And that leads me back, Aaron, to the beginning of what we spoke about because I wanna come back and push on this part. Why do you want why do you want to leave? I feel like you don't want to do music anymore, and that makes me sad in my little Josh heart.
Well, it's not that I don't want to do music anymore, but I feel um and also I got to preface this all which by saying that I'm doing a lot of music.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm confused.
I'm currently doing a lot. I do feel like it's a little bit like my last hurrah in a way though. Um and a lot of that has to do with things that are going on at home.
Mm, mhm,
Um and also like just yeah, no, but I think about well, I guess the phrase tend the garden that you can touch. I mean, I'm in this little town and I'm seeing things change rapidly. Hudson, home of the playground of the affluent. It's just like it's insane
mm,
what going down the main street. There's no ice cream stores for kids. There's no place to get ice cream in this town. And like that means that kids who are growing up here can't just walk into town and get an ice cream.
mhm,
Kids who don't have a lot of money, let's put it that way. You can go and get a freaking gelato, like a hibiscus flavored gelato or some bullshit with alcohol, but it's not for kids, you know?
mhm,
It's just
mhm,
and it's really upsetting. I've been working with the Hudson Youth Department on their bike
mhm,
with their bike co-op. And it's like I get so sad. I have so much satisfaction from doing stuff like that and working with the kids. And it's for at risk kids
mhm,
specifically, not just like any kid can waltz in there because a lot of kids have parents with jobs and a house and bicycles at home and their parents have time to like go for bike rides with them, and their
Hmm.
parents have time to teach them about their bikes if they wanted. And the kids that I'm working with don't have any of that. And some of them are experiencing temporary houselessness and have lived through really traumatic upbringings. And it's like it's a different level of nurture
Mm.
than I've ever been able to experience in music. Ever, you know? Like music is such a different, it's like, especially in the last year of not having that interaction with an audience, like I don't get that feeling, that gratitude that just goes both directions nonstop. It's a circular gratitude in a performance. And not having that has, fuck, brought me into some deep depressions throughout the last year, and then also needing to change things up and find ways to feel that outside of music. And also, what's the longevity of my process? What's the longevity of being a musician and performing and touring? And like you think about, I mean, you bring in all the other things like streaming and actually being able to make money as a musician. Unless you're top tier, it's like thankless in a way, at least financially.
I'm
And
thinking
I,
of
I I don't
starting
want
a.
to say that that's everything about, that's like not the
Hmm.
reason why I make music, but it certainly helps when I can pay bills and like, you know,
Yeah. Well,
eat.
the thing the way you're talking about the like the bike program that you're and sorry I'm bike
It's a bike
program,
co-op.
bike co-op, like that, like I think you found it. Like I don't feel like you. I feel like there's something about the music career part of like your life that sorry. I think it can be both. Just do both, and don't lower your expectations for the music part of it
Right. It's like yes
because
and
yeah, because for, I was thinking of something while you were talking, like you were when you were saying like the joy that you get out of working at the bike co-op versus the joy that I think most people think people get from playing music live. Or at least the assumption is that like when I'm on stage, it's like Josh is just in an emotional heaven like all the time. And it's like actually kind of rarely. Like
a lot of stress.
it's a lot of stress, it's a lot of work, and it's just execution and all of And I'm surprised now at 41 how little joy I get out of the act of performing. The reason now for me to be in so percussion is like Soci and the food packing. It's like those are the two things where I actually feel that circular sort of like, yep, okay. Like I'm plugged back into myself where it can self generate and that I don't have to do very little work. It's like a perpetual motion machine. And I finally fucking figured it out. And humans have not been able to figure that out. Except I only get to do it like 2 weeks out of the year.
Right.
And now it's just like back to stage plots and learning a new commission and oh boy isn't that fun to learn new notes like but for you like that you the way you're talk just the like the sort of the way you hold your head when you're talking about your bike co-op versus the way you hold your head when you're talking about music feels to me like you just need to lower your expectations of music and keep doing the bike co-op thing full on and let the music do what it does in response to that organically and don't feel like you have to force it. I mean, that's the last thing anybody the world needs is somebody doing music or a bike co-op because they feel like they should.
Oh, yeah.
Those kids aren't going to get jack shit out of Arone Dyer if you're there because you saw some Facebook post that said do better and you're like, well, I got to do better. Like that's this is not going to help anybody. That's just going to do good for you.
That's weird. That's
So
weird. Yeah.
can I
Yes.
ask you a personal question?
Okay.
How does your depression manifest for you?
Um, I stopped wanting to get out of bed, and I stopped getting out of bed eventually. And uh then I that's like that cycle of getting mad at myself for sleeping in,
Hmm.
but I'm sleeping in because I don't know what to do with myself. And then but then getting mad at myself and beating myself up and being really hard on myself because I would say that I have high expectations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, then that, just kind of exacerbates the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have taken to, if I get into that position for more than 4 days, I'll, well, I guess it's taken a little bit longer, more like 2 weeks. But I start thinking about it at 4 days. I'm like, well, I should really do something about this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but if it doesn't stop, then I'm like, I'll microdose mushrooms or try to change it up with a chemical, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that is just to kind of break the pattern. So, but then I'll go through whatever that does to me, which is microdosing. It doesn't like affect me long term, but
Mm-hmm.
it like kind of jumps me out of the pattern um and helps for a moment, which if I can then manage to become productive by like writing crazy impossible lists of things to do, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and and like just go for a jog, like yeah, like little things that I can do to make myself feel better. Floss picks, floss.
Eat.
Eat, like do little things and then see the success,
Mm-hmm.
cross it
Mm-hmm.
off. Um, then that helps me get into a different mindset. Then it's a matter of actually getting myself to do work.
Mm-hmm.
And by work, I mean sit in front of this computer and pretend, if I can't immediately feel it, pretend that I'm being creative.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, I'm in a position where I'm actually obsessing over a song
Mm-hmm.
that I'm arranging for Stargaze.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really amazing place to feel. So I'm really proud of myself for having gotten to this point, and I'm really happy that I'm obsessed. And I don't know if you probably understand the obsession thing. It's like the
Mm-hmm.
thing I can't stop thinking about it, and
Yeah.
I'll go to sleep with it in my head, and it'll come into my dreams, and then and it gets annoying.
Mm-hmm.
But that's such a good feeling. It's such a good thing. So I'm in a good place right now.
Good.
Uh, how does it manifest for you?
Well, very similarly, my thing is, for me, it started in grad school where like school would end, and then I'd have this weird like postpartum. I didn't understand like why is everything over? Like the last 10 months were all about this thing, and now it's like wait, it's just gone. Like, and so there would be a month where I would just lay in bed and like watch West Wing because I couldn't figure out. I just didn't know like, and I didn't know what it was at the time. I just was like, oh, it's summer. I'm relaxing.
Yeah.
But it would be like lay in bed under the covers with the AC on all day.
Mhm.
Only get up to eat a piece of pizza and then go back to bed. And but then school would start up and I would be totally fine all year.
Mm.
And so, but then later on in life, my dad passed away. It started to manifest with anxiety. Like my heart would race, and then like that would make me upset, and then so like that sort of cyclical thing is sort of my constant treadmill I'm on, which is like simmering a low simmer anxiety all the time, and
Mm.
then like right now the summertime is like my I hate the summertime. I mean, I love it for other reasons, but it's like I just know there's a horror movie about to come on, and I have to somehow
Mm.
figure out how not to watch it because I've been watching it since I was in grad school.
Mhm.
And this year has been really bad for that. I mean, just not having any out, like not being able to get out of the house, um, and so yeah, it manifests in basically inaction, and I just freeze. And for me, the obsession, like, I need to like go walk, do an exercise, like get out and do exercise, which I don't do on a regular basis like I should. I'm trying to get back on that horse.
You come to SBCEC with me?
I will.
That at 8:15 in the morning.
Can't do
Are
that,
you
Aaron.
kidding me? What's up with musicians? What's up with that? Why are you falling into that stereotype?
But yeah, it's I would say that obsession is for me is the. I mean, this is the thing when I see some people online post or talk a generation younger than mine and ours talking about like the grind and the hustle mentality as being a negative thing to avoid, like self care. And it's like, man, listen, self care, I get it. I'm bad at it, but I suspect more of us than not are bad at it, and the grind is actually the balm that cures it for me. Like
Hmm.
it's a way, it's my lifeline out. And
Hmm.
so to tell me that I should stop grinding, it's like, all right, well then I'm gonna drown.
The purpose,
Yeah, and so like
feeling purpose.
I don't know. Do you feel like that's a healthy?
I think that we've probably we were probably raised by parents who taught us the deep value of working our asses off in order to become successful. And I think that as creatives, we translated that drive to our work, but that's gotten us into a position of not being able to enjoy the grind in a way, or finding that putting ourselves into the position of working so, working that hard to almost an unhealthy point, that is actually like that we have taught ourselves to think that that is healthy
Mm,
and that that is good and that is what we need to do because that is what will make us successful. But then there's this whole other way of thinking about it that's like, do what you love, do it until it doesn't work, and then move on.
mm-hmm,
And then um and find joy. And like that's the the joy is the thing that I strive for.
mm-hmm,
And I think that it's in music, and I think that it's in writing music and creating music, and it's definitely in performing for me.
mm-hmm,
That's when I feel the most me,
mm,
is when I'm performing. But but it takes a lot of work to get to that point. Um and I think that that is also kind of like this weird myth I've believed for a long time. I don't think that it's healthy for, I mean, I think Americans especially are taught to work really extra hard, and I think that quarantine and COVID has taught us that actually no. No, we can probably survive with a lot less work, and we can survive with a lot fewer items in our homes, and we can,
mm,
survive with a simpler uh uh what's it called, food palette, and like,
mm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's trying to figure out like what I always hate this like when you say like what to be successful. It's like, well, the older I get, the more I and even just in talking to my students, I'm acutely aware of how relative that is person to person. Like
Mhm.
somebody sees me in so percussion as successful, but then somebody else's version of success might go away. They might redefine that for so once they realize how much money I make. You know,
Yeah.
like because that's part of some people's equation. It's not that it's not part of mine. I want to make as much money as I can because I'd like to be comfortable. It's
Hmm.
it's easier to have money than it is to not have it. And
Is it
or
though?
well, it solves more problems than not having it.
Does it though?
I don't know. I feel that way. I'm not so sure that it's
See,
true,
that's
but but what I'm saying is like I would like to have enough money where I could not have to worry about helping my friends if they need like
yeah,
$500. Like I would love to have enough money to feel like that was easy.
right.
Um, but I don't. That's not why I don't have that money, and I'm okay with that
Hmm.
because I do enjoy. I get enough emotional currency out of what I do. Um, and I guess I just am trying to not care what other people if people think I'm successful.
Hmm.
And then that's where like if all you did from here on out, Aaron, and you never did anything new, but you just were like, you know what, fucking drone choir. That's the thing. Baby girl, I love that. and that's okay with you, then that has to be the answer, right? like
It
like
has to be.
it has to be the answer. Otherwise, you're just going to be spinning your wheels.
Yep. Yep. What was I gonna say? Oh, I watched this program about what was it called? Generation Wealth.
Mm.
Do you see this? I think
Mm-mm.
it's
I've
on
seen
Netflix.
it go by on Netflix, but I've never watched it.
It is interesting, and yet it's basically like here's a bunch of like people who you would think of are successful, but like their lives are wacky and they're depressed and they don't have any real relationships with anybody and like and we're all obsessed with
Hmm.
being famous and rich. And like what does that actually do for anybody? You want to be, I mean, do you really want to live like let's take Taylor Swift for example, who has a stalker room
Right.
and bodyguards
Yeah, like
and can't walk around on the street,
or Britney Spears.
or Britney Spears. Um,
Her dad
and
owns her.
anybody, what?
Her dad owns her.
Right? Yeah.
Like
Like
that's fucked up.
it's so fucked up. And like, yeah, no, I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. That actually sounds pretty like a bummer.
Or say what you want, Michael Jackson.
Michael
Like,
Jackson.
I mean,
Lots of examples
hmm
of like what I wouldn't want out of fame and fortune and so on and so forth. But yet I still strive for something like it. What is that? Stupid is what that is. That's why I've decided I'm just going to make long fingernails out of paper
they're
the
for
rest of my
playing bass
life.
guitar, right?
What?
They're for playing bass guitar. Boom,
Yeah.
boom, boom.
Dum 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 da dum 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 da dum da
Well,
da dum dum
uh,
dum dum
can I
dum.
ask you a final question that's not maybe a deep like topic related question, but it's something I saw on speaking of your social media that I've been following.
Uh-oh.
You were just on an all lady bike ride,
Oh yeah, motorcycles.
and can you tell me a little bit about what was that and how was that?
It's a motorcycle rally for ladies,
Mm-hmm.
for women, female identified folks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's just something that happens every year. It's like a rally, but no men are allowed. And it's, I don't know, it's like I find it a little, there's parts of it that I find really cheesy. Like, ugh, I don't understand how like the music is so basic.
What
The music that they play at the
basic
parties
is it?
is
Basic white girl music?
fucking basic as shit. It's just, oh, of course you're gonna fucking sing that L7 song now. Ugh.
What's L
Or
seven?
I don't know if it's L7 or who. Oh, Four Non Blondes. Is that it? See, I don't even know. It's just like that basic to me. Like
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 Lilith Fair compilations and you know.
oh, there's no, definitely not Lilith Fair. There's nobody singing Enya or Sarah McLachlan. That's not happening. No,
Okay, all
they're
right,
like
yeah.
they're like they want the anthems.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah, they want the anthems.
So
And so
how
they're all singing the anthems for karaoke. I sang Michael McDonald this time. I
they
sang
didn't have Ancient Tool Gadget on the
I asked them if they had Buchan Gays. Obviously not.
I listen, I think there's some money to be made there, Aaron, if we should do like a music minus one karaoke thing for our album.
Cool. Are you gonna sing it?
Sure.
I want to see you sing Ancient Tool Gadget.
No, diazepam.
You want to sing Diazepam? Okay.
Yeah, because all you have to do is stand on stage and go
Oh, is that all you have to do?
pretty much. Yeah, press a button on something that's plugged into something and go
I just want you to do that again. Josh Quillen takes requests.
Oh, Aaron, I am grateful that you nudged me to speak this morning. I appreciate it. And
Likewise.
you are, I appreciate you being a texting buddy throughout all of the pandemic. There are a handful of people that I can count on my hand that serendipitously, for one reason or another, reached out to me, and we stayed in contact the moment the pandemic happened. And I feel like you were one of those people.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a handful of people who are still reaching out, and there's a lot of people who aren't, and
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
A lot of things have changed.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But
But
I appreciate your staying power, Aaron. That's what I'm saying.
hey, thanks. Likewise. I'm glad you were doing this. Thanks for having me on pre, mid, mid again, late mid,
We're
late.
post.
And
I'm
this
calling
is,
post. We're
you
post.
think this is post?
At some point, it is going to be, and I just decided it's. I mean, I wear my mask if I need to, and like I'm not out there banging the anti-mask drum, but for my mental sanity, I have to wake up and be like, all right,
All right.
it's over.
Yep. Yeah. I think a lot of us have to do that.
Otherwise, I mean, it's the. I went to the grocery store the other day, first time without a mask, and I walked in. I was like holding my breath, and it was like super weird. And I was like, why don't you just, breathe?
Yeah.
It was totally fine.
Mhm.
None of the like 90-year-old bagger who was wearing a mask since March, not wearing a mask anymore. And I was like, hi, Harold, how are you? And he's like, I'm great. It's like, you know what? If 81-year-old Harold was great without a mask, I got to trust 81-year-old Harold.
Yeah, totally. It's good to hear somebody say that too. How are you? I'm great. I'm doing well.
And to be able to see their mouth make those sounds.
Yeah. I'm super fine.
You're a
Thanks.
super fan?
Super fine. How are you?
You're
Super
super
fine.
fun.
Super
Oh,
fine.
super fine. Okay. Um, well, Aaron,
Hey, this has been great. Let's talk again
yeah,
soon.
let's wrap this up. Let's just stare. Why don't we do this to end the podcast? Let's just look at each other as if one of us is about to say something, and then I'll just end the Zoom session, and that'll be the end of the podcast. But well, we've not yet. Hold on a second, Aaron. You're playing the bit too early. Just, I know you're a yes and person, but we're not in the bit yet. Um, I just I just want to say I love you dearly. I hope you stay healthy. And oh, there was one more thing I was gonna say.
Oh, Jesus Christ. This shit never ends. Just kidding.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. This podcast is brought to you by Liquid Drum, liquiddrum.com down in Waco, Texas. My good friend Todd Meehan runs an amazing percussion company down there. Great merch, great content. Check him out, liquiddrum.com. Also, Kyle Dunleavy, dunleavypans.com, DUNLEAVY pans.com. Kyle Dunleavy makes and builds all the steel drums that I perform and teach on in So Percussion, as well as at NYU and Princeton. He's an amazing tuner, builder, just a really nice guy, very dependable. Check him out. If you are interested at all in steel pan advocacy, want to learn more about the goings-on in pan in Brooklyn, check out paninmotion.com. My good friend Kendall Williams, Jerry Guy, Trisha Guy, and Arisha John run an amazing organization called paninmotion.com. Check them out. And finally, Alejandre Mirage runs an amazing clothing apparel company in Brooklyn that is steel pan centric. You can check him out at mangochow, CHOW, clothing.com. I own a bunch of his shirts. They're amazing, very stylish, beautifully made. Check them out. mangochowclothing.com. Okay, hope you're well. Talk to you soon. Bye.